It's time to start prepping for the 2 Scoops bench pillow. Today I'm prepping my materials for the Kimberbell 2 Scoops bench pillow. I will note that I will be making a wall hanging instead of a pillow. And I am going to go over briefly how I organize and prepare for any of my projects. I will link a couple of videos that go more into depth with the batting and the fabric prep. And I will just kind of, in this video, go over kind of generally what I do. And I do want to say that I have had this project for about 1.5 years. I purchased the fabric kit and the embellishment kit as well as the project. And this is an older Kimberbell project, even when I purchased it. And I've always loved it and have wanted to do it, but other projects have come and I've enjoyed doing those. But the other day I was in my local quilt shop and they had a sample pillow, one that they had actually stitched out, and I forgot how much I loved it. And that's the reason I purchased it, of course, in the first place. This is, a cute pillow that you look at. It just does not do justice. The fabrics and the things from the embellishment kit and just everything about this pillow in person is just so great. And so when I was getting some fabric cut and saw that pillow again in person, I remembered why I wanted to do that one so much. So that's why I decided to just go ahead and start working on this. I have a lot of the things already prepped, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I just wanted to say that the picture just does not do this cute project justice. And so I'm super excited to get this project done. Now, when I get a project that either has a book or in this case, have printed out all of the directions, I will take it to a copy store and have it bound with a coil binding. I haven't done that to this project yet. This is the Star Spangled Beauty that I just finished, and this came already printed. And so I just took it to my local copy center and had them put a coil binding. And then I also get the clear plastic covers for the front and the back. And then I am protecting my book or my printed pages. So when I get ready to prep, the things I need are my fabric and my batting to start. My batting I have been using just Warm and Natural. And this is a large package that is the size of a full-size quilt, which is 90 by 96 inches. And I have used this same package for my Spring Showers quilt, my Pumpkins and Potions ladder quilt, my Star Spangled Beauty ladder quilt, the Candy Cane Lane bench pillow, which I used as a wall hanging, my Hoppin' Down the Bunny Trail wall hanging, the 2 Scoops. I've already had the batting cut, the Sweetest Pie that I haven't done yet, and I think a couple more that I have already cut from this one package, and I still have a lot left. So one package will go a long way. And so how I decide on how I'm going to cut my batting is I will go to the block, and we'll just pick the first block in this, and I go through, no matter what project it is, just going through the book block by block and look at the size that I will need. So how I use my batting is I cut my batting exactly to size. And so here are some that I have prepped that I will link the video that goes into more detail on how I cut my batting and my fabric. But what I do to know what size to cut is I come to the block by block quilting instructions. Whatever the quilting design size is, and this is the size that we will use for the background quilting for that block, and in this case it's a 6x6 design, I know that I need to cut my batting 6x6. Again, that's because I choose to cut my batting exactly to size. So then I would just make a tally and go to the next block, which in this case would be 2 blocks, the 2 cherries. I'll come down to the block by block quilting, and this uses a background quilting that are 2x2. So I know that for these blocks, I need to cut a piece of batting that's 2 inches by 2 inches. And so I will just go through my entire instruction book, look at the size, and make a tally. Then I know how many of each size I need to cut. And so that's, again, I choose to cut my batting exactly to size. Now, that does mean that I will skip a step when I am actually at my machine. I will not do the tack down of the batting because it's cut to size. There would be nothing to tack down. However, if that's something that you don't want to do and you want to tack the batting down and trim it, then you would just need to look at this size and add an inch. So for example, instead of cutting 6x6 like I do, you would cut a 7" by 7", and that would give you a 1/2 inch around the entire block that then you could tack down and trim the excess batting away. And so that's how I figure out the sizes for my batting. And again, I will go through the entire book and just make a tally of what sizes that I need. Now for the fabric, my fabric happens to already be cut, and I will link the video. I did this when I prepped 4 projects. I did all the batting at once for 4 projects, and this was one of them. And then it's just a project that I haven't stitched out yet. And so I had cut all of my fabric to size at the same time. But I, for my Kimberbell projects, have so far purchased the fabric kits for all of the projects. I've gotten a lot of them through my local quilt store. Some I've had to find for older projects, like this 2 scoops is quite an older project I found on Etsy. And so when you get the fabric, you need to know what sizes to cut. And so Kimberbell, at the beginning of their instructions, always gives a list of how to cut your fabric. First, they give a list on the fabric and what block it is used for. And of course, it'll tell you things like what section and the size. And then it will also give you instructions on how to cut the fabric. Because when you get a fabric kit, you will have small pieces, some medium, some large, and then some very large pieces. And so this diagram, or these diagrams, show you the best way to use that fabric so that you'll have enough fabric. And you just follow the instructions on how to cut and what size to cut each of the fabrics. They do give you a little swatch so you know which fabric to cut. And so for mine, again, I had done this about 1.5 years ago. All of my fabric has already been cut to size, and my batting has been cut to size. Now, once my fabric is cut, 99.99% of the time, I back every single piece of fabric with a woven fusible interfacing. This interfacing I just get on Amazon. I get, rolls of it. And what I will do is take this to my ironing board, and I will just lay this out, of course, adhesive side up. Let's start with this full piece. And then I will just kind of jigsaw this all together. And so I will put the wrong side of the fabric down, and I will just start laying these out however I can get them. I'll butt them right next to each other because, of course, this is adhesive, and I don't want my iron to touch that. So I will do my best to get all of these just, stacked up however I can. It doesn't matter if, they stay obviously together in groups of the fabric. I will just get this, and there's a lot of fabric. So this will take a while, and I will just lay this out, and then once I get a pretty good section, I will just lightly press enough to adhere it so that I can cut the individual pieces apart. Then I'll just stack all those up. When I have all of the fabric lightly adhered and cut apart, then I will iron each one, and it takes 8 to 12 seconds per area to get this fused on. And so this can be quite the task. I do, as you notice, save my pieces because, for example, this piece, or even the small piece, sometimes you think, oh, I don't need that, but that fits perfect for smaller pieces. And so of course you have to be careful to not touch your iron to the adhesive, but I would probably come in and just tack it enough where it was adhered, and I would trim that off and set it aside until I was ready to get these pressed on. So I do keep my scraps, and I will do that to all of my fabrics, and that includes the larger, and actually more important, to the larger background pieces. Now this again is an older project, and so in their instructions they say to just put fusible interfacing on the back of the background fabrics, which are the larger base of the blocks. Their more current projects, for the most part, say to back all of the fabric. I do back all of the fabrics, again, unless there's a specific reason not to, because I think on the appliques, having the interfacing on the back just makes for kind of a crisper, smoother piece of fabric. So when you applique, in my opinion, it looks better. And so again, I use this for pretty much all of my fabric. So when it comes to stabilizers, for the most part, they tell you in the directions to use a no-show mesh, and that is just a product that looks like this, and I use this maybe 20% of the time. I like it, but I find that I can't use my iron on high because it sticks to this. And so I have to turn my iron down a little bit, or I have to put a pressing cloth when I'm pressing the block, let's say when it's completely done, before I want to cut it to size. And so while I do use this, for the most part, when I do the Kimberbell projects, I use muslin for my stabilizer. Now, I would only use muslin for a stabilizer when there is batting, and then the background fabric that, of course, is backed with interfacing. And this gives enough stabilization. This press is wonderful. It feels good. And I just usually buy the 120-inch wide muslin. I usually buy the unbleached, but you could buy the bleached. It would just be, the same, just white. This is kind of an off-white natural color. Sometimes I buy the 90-inch. It just depends on, what I can find. And so what I do is I will cut strips of that 120 inches to fit my different hoop sizes. I've pulled out two. This fits my 6x10 and this fits my 5x7. And this is just a strip that I don't cut to size to fit my hoop. And if you've seen any of my videos, you'll see that I do this mostly because I am able to save on stabilizer. And so I would just have this long strip, and if it's a piece that I've just cut off, this would be 120 inches or 90 inches. And I would hoop this. And when I go to stitch out my design, for example, I would move my design either up or down, and that depends on where your excess strip is. Probably the most of the time I hoop it so that the excess fabric goes to the top or the back of my hoop and kind of back off my table. And so this would be my hoop, and I would move my design down so that it saves more room up here. And I'll go over that more if you haven't seen how I hoop and stitch out. But this is what I use for my stabilizer. And again, I just will cut long strips for each of my hoop sizes. I use my 7 by 12 and my 9 by 14 probably the most. And we'll go over that more as the project is continuing. But that's the stabilizer that I use. Now, as far as organizing all of this product, I just get these packets, these little organizing packets. They're just plastic. I label with painter's tape the name of the block and the page number, and I just put them in order of how I'm going to stitch. And so then when I have all of my fabric backed and everything's ready to go, I will go through the book again and see what needs to be in this packet so that when I'm ready to stitch, I can just pull this packet and have things ready to go. So for example, for this very first block, I would of course put the background fabric. I would put the fabric for the 2 scoops of ice cream, and that's all, and the batting, and that's all that would go into this packet, even though this uses flexi foam and embroidery leather. Those are items that come in the embellishment kit, which is a separate purchase. And I so far have gotten the embellishment kits because they come with a lot of the specialty items needed for your quilt. Now, you don't have to. You can source your own, do something different. But I don't pull these and put them with the packets. I will put this in its own packet. And then, for example, when I get ready to stitch out this first block, I will pull this packet that has the fabric, and I will pull the embellishment packet and pull the items that I need, use them, and then put the remainder back for the next time I need to use that. And so that's how I do the embellishments. And so that's how I keep organized. I just have, a little plastic bin that I keep all of the packets. I keep, of course, the embellishment kit. If I have a box that the fabric kit came in, I will stick it in the back. I do have, the CD. I think this was it was a CD. I just keep everything together. My extra fabric, this didn't come in a box because I bought this on Etsy. I will just put it in the back in case, I make a mistake and I need to get some more fabric or for whatever reason. And I keep everything that I need, including the directions, in this basket so that everything I need is ready to go. For this project, it is stitched out in sections. So, of course, you could just stitch them all out and then sew, everything together when you were completely done. But how they have this grouped is, again, it's hard to see what's on the top and the bottom, but this whole section right here, this rectangle, they have you stitch out all of these blocks and then sew that section together. Then you would come to the popsicles and ice cream sandwich and the sundae and all of these as your next section, and then stitch those together, and of course, and then add it to the first, and then the same with the third section. So in this particular project, they actually go in order, and so this is in order, these packets, the same order as in the book. But that's really usually not the case with Kimberbell. And so, for example, I just finished this Star Spangled Beauty. And for example, this first section is right here. These were not all in a row. They had theirs in a different order. And so I always put these in order of how I'm going to sew them together. And so this one luckily just happens to be all in the right order. This one we had to jump back and forth. And so again, you can choose just to stitch out all of the blocks and then put them together at the very end. I like to start putting them together so I can see big blocks of the quilt coming together. All right, so that's kind of a quick rundown on getting things prepared. Again, I will list a couple of links down below in the description box so that you can check out several videos if you want, with very specific instructions on how I cut my batting, cut my fabric, how I organize, and it goes into a lot more detail. So I have all of my packets ready to go and in my basket. So in my basket, of course, I have the directions, and I'll leave those just to the front. I have my embellishment kit, and this has a lot of embellishments, and the few things that are not needed until the pillow's done, or in my case the wall hanging's done, I put in the back just so that I don't have to keep pulling in and out. So that will stay in the front so it's easy to get to, because there's a lot of embellishments with this project. And so then I just have all of the other fabrics, of course, less the embellishments, in each of the block packets. And so when I'm ready to stitch this one happens, the first one happens to have some embellishments, from the kit. And so I will pull those, use it for the block, and then put it back. And so all of my blocks have been put into these packets. Also, the rest of the fabric and my CD and things like that, and the fabric for the borders, are all back in the back that I will keep there until my project's done. And then once I'm done with the project, I will just take my fabric and put it with my other Kimberbell fabric. I do have one change I'm going to make with the banana split. It is supposed to use this fun print. I love it, but the banana split has whipped cream on top, and you just can't really see the white. Even though this is an off-white, it just doesn't show up very good. So I'm debating whether to use this mint green for the background. And so I just took it out of the fabric kit. It hasn't been cut, and it doesn't have interfacing yet. So I'm going to wait until I have the blocks done around it to see if I want to use this mint. I may change it to another color. I'll leave this, in case I just go back to that one, but that's the change I'm going to make. And anyways, everything's all ready to go. So now it's easy to just pull a packet and start working on my wall hanging. All right, so let's get started on this cute wall hanging.